So every year when I write that letter, I try to think of what are the most important things. And I would add to that the free Western world, because that's what worries me the most is that the Ukraine war, the terrorist activities in Israel, the thread that's drawing between Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, the difficulties of our relationship with China, that whole thing is challenging what we would call the free democratic Western world. And that to me is the most important thing, that we get all of that right. The one thing you got to be cautious about, a lot of it is driven by just fiscal spending. Mm-hmm. So even today, the deficit is 6% of GDP, almost $2 trillion. That's driving a lot of this growth, and that will have other consequences possibly down the road, called inflation, which may not go away like people expect. So when I look at the range of possible outcomes, you can have that soft landing. I'm a little more worried that it may not be so soft and inflation may not quite go away people expect. I'm not talking about just this year, I'm talking about 25 and 26. The rates may have to go up a little higher. I'm talking about the 10-year rate, the 5-year rate. And that can have consequences. So 20% of America have not done particularly well over the last 20 years. Incomes barely went up. They're actually starting to go up for the first time in almost 20 years. Remember, suicide, fentanyl, crime, inflation. There are a lot of negative effects. Some people can't get mortgages, can't buy the home. Their jobs are still paying, I think 25% of the jobs in America pay $15 an hour or less. So yeah, there's part of society who's kind of struggling. Part of society who's not. And I think that's a different issue about how we deal with the policy, but you can see why that has people upset. And then you see a whole bunch of other things that people look at in the world. They're worried about geopolitics, they're worried about politics, they're worried about polarization. So you have a disconnect about economy and, as you said, confidence levels. And last year and this year, I would put out the same issues. Huge amount of fiscal deficit, huge amount of QE. We don't really fully know the consequences yet. Part of it might be inflation. A lot of things in the future are inflationary. The green economy, the remilitarization of the world, obviously the deficits, which basically aren't going to go away as far as the eye can see. And so it puts me in this, and geopolitics. All that puts me on the side of caution that things may not go as well as people expect. Again, that's not a 24 forecast. I'm cautious. So I think I said in my letter, the odds of a soft landing, the market kind of prices in 70%. I think it's half of that. And so therefore the odds of something different, is 65%, et cetera. And so, we'll see. But I don't really know, as a business person, I try to be prepared for all of that. Just a little cautious. It looks a little bit more like the 70s to me. And I point out to a lot of people, things look pretty rosy in 1972. They were not rosy in 1973. So don't get lulled into a false sense of security because the today looks okay, that tomorrow's going to be okay. So just trying to separate the two. Partially, when you spend that kind of money, you're going to have growth. And I think if you look at Bidenomics, yeah, you do have parts of it where we needed some of it, like some of the industrial policy. I think the infrastructure thing is terrific. That was bipartisan. Other things will remain to be seen. So I think some of the American public looks at it like, what are they getting? Mm-hmm. So if you go to rural America or inner cities, I'm not sure they feel like they're being lifted up by this economy. I think the Fed was probably late in raising rates. They caught up. They're probably right and watching right now. We don't know what's going to happen. You might as well wait. It's very hard to forecast the future. I've always told the Fed they should stop forecasting. I mean, obviously the data dependent. When someone makes a statement, we're data dependent, what are they going to say? No matter what the data says, we're going to do what we want anyway. Well, they can't. So they should wait and see, but they may have to get a little bit tougher. And we also don't know the full effect of QE. I'm a little more on the cautious side of that. Most people have a general feeling that you can reduce the balance sheet by several $1 trillion and its effect will not be felt. I'm not so sure. We've never had it before. So it's never really been tested. And the one time they started reversing QE at one point, it did cause some ramification in the marketplace. I kind of expect that again. I mean, '08 was a real crisis. Bear Stearns was a much more complicated, and so was WAMU than this one. This was much simpler. We thought it was the last domino because only a handful of banks had the same problems of concentrated deposits, too much interest rate exposure, et cetera. And so I said it was the last domino, provided rates don't go up and there's not a major recession. Because if that happens, obviously it'll affect banks again. So it was a completely different thing. We wouldn't have done it if it didn't help stabilize the system. We would not have done it just for ourselves. I point out in the letter, because people always look at just the financial side of that, but in reality, 10,000 people on day one who were working on future-looking projects went to do backward-looking projects to consolidate 165 systems, rules, procedures, et cetera, though it was a simpler bank. And part of the earnings was just using our own capital liquidity. I tell people you don't have to buy a company, and thousands of people when you can just buy assets to do the same thing. So part of it had nothing to do with First Republic. So the financial results are nice, but we would try to be honest about where they come from. I think Israel has the right to defend itself. I think war is a terrible thing. I think people have to be honest about what war is, and when they look at these civilian deaths and all the things like that. So I don't know the specifics of the military. I think the notion that they aren't going to defend themselves is wrong. So I'll leave the military experts decide, what's the right way to go do that. Every general I see on TV, and I've spoken to several, city conflict is really bad. Mm-hmm. And, it's door by door, higher amount of civilian casualties. Hamas must have known there was going to be quite a reaction to what they did. By the way, it's unjustifiable for any reason ever. So I want to be clear about that. It could be, again, I'm going to put odds in this, could be a potential disaster. Because, this is the first war in Europe, free democratic nation invaded by 200,000 or 300,000 Russian soldiers under the threat of nuclear blackmail. So, we've never had nuclear blackmail before, which is also teaching the whole world, maybe having nuclear weapons is a pretty good thing because people will be afraid of you. And you can, abuse a neighbor if you feel like it. It would be on the border of NATO. Obviously NATO is rearming right now, but the other thing is affecting all alliances. So all military alliances, all global economic alliances, the nexus of Iran, North Korea, and China makes it very hard, in my view, for the Chinese-American relationship because we're kind of on different sides of that. They say they're neutral, whether they're helping or not. We are clearly not neutral. If Russia wins, I personally think you might see a lot of people deciding that, will America stand up for Europe? Can you rely on them? And if you can't rely on them, what are you going to do? And that includes economically. So that's why I kind of talk about the economic battlefield and the battlefield. So economically, every nation can say, what makes me secure? What makes me secure in energy, food, and all the things I need? So I'm a little worried that if Russia wins that war, you're going to see kind of the world kind of enter a little bit of chaos as people realign alliances and economic relationships, et cetera. The whole thing is this, after World War II, the Bretton Woods, the Marshall Plan, the rebuild of NATO, WTO, all these structures are put in place that actually led to a very safe, secure world, Pax Americana, lifted billions of people out of poverty, and basically peace. There are a lot of small wars, but basically peace among all the major powers. If that's torn asunder, who knows what it's going to be replaced with? But I look at the Western world, economic alliances should be kept together. And we need to help the rest of the world. So, Bob Gates writes in his book, The Exercise of Power, about the symphony of power, that we've overused and maybe misused our military muscle. We've underused economic, intelligence, development, finance, diplomacy, all these other things. So, American leadership we need American leadership. It should be done with our allies. It can't be done, our way or the highway. It can't be done, America's known to, if it takes advantage of a situation, which we don't normally, but together, trade, development, finance, helping the nations, and then, reforming these agencies, which clearly some don't work. And you can debate any which one you want, but to get trade right, we need to negotiate. I would re-enter the TPP. I think our government's got to start talking about trade. I remind them we have trade with these nations. So when they say we can't talk trade, well, you already have it. Why can't you talk about making it better? And of course, the TPP would be a geostrategic home run. Economically great, geostrategically great. Our allies would love it and bring everyone closer together. And then you can also negotiate with China from a better position of strength. So you're not trying to keep them out of everything. You just want to set it up in a way you think works for the free and democratic world. It looks like a lot of these folks would like to destroy that. And so we should do everything we can to stop that from happening.